Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. Well, today we are talking about sex, so this is going to be fun right off the bat. I just want to thank everyone that has sent in some questions. Really appreciated that. So we have them down and we're going to talk about some of those things. But in order for us to do this and talk about sex, we got to invite a sex therapist. Her name is SkyeBlu Cutchie, and she is a licensed mental health therapist and a certified integrated intimacy professional. We're going to learn a lot about what that means in a little bit. SkyeBlu has a passion for talking about sexuality, which I think is going to be really helpful today. So as well, she's owned a private mental health practice, and she's had this practice since 2019. And it primarily focuses on relationships, intimacy, and sex therapy, and it's based out of the Seattle, Washington area, and that's where she currently lives. Her other areas of specialty are kink and alternative sexual preferences, as well as LGBTQIA2+ therapy and consensual non-monogamy. And I know you're all listening and wondering what some of these things are. Don't worry, I am too. So we're going to find out about all of this. And when SkyeBlu is not talking about sex, she and her partner spend a lot of time with their 3 fur babies, Raisin, Oatmeal, and Mochi. I love those names. SkyeBlu loves fantasy audiobooks as well and spending her time outdoors in the great Pacific Northwest. So welcome, SkyeBlu. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kieran. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this chat with you today.
Yes, I know. So am I. So are we here. And you know what? I just have to say, part of why I'm really excited is talking about sex. This topic was one of my top 3 reasons why I wanted to start this podcast. So I've been thinking about this. I've had a lot of time to think about this conversation. So I'm really glad that we're here. And for a while there, the reason why it took a while to get here was trying to figure out who the right person to have on would be. And it came up that you were a good therapist to come on. So I'm so happy because I don't know any sex therapists. This is a new thing for me. So I'm really glad you're here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I feel honored. You chose me for this topic, and I'm super excited to dig deeper into it with you.
Awesome. And thank you. But before we do anything, I have to go back to your bio. We know each other a little bit through a mutual friend who's also in the field. And so when I knew you a little bit ago, you had Raisin and Oatmeal. So now you have Mochi. Who's Mochi?
Yeah. So Raisin's my dog. Oatmeal's my older cat. And now we have Mochi. She's our newest family member. She's I call her my marshmallow because so she's a cat as well. She has white long hair and big blue eyes. And Mochi is a Japanese dessert. Oh. And yeah, so it goes really well with the other food names. Yeah. That's our theme. My partner and I, we love naming our pets after food. It's super cute.
Love it.
And why not?
Yeah. No, I love the names. I love it. But I thank you for telling me that because I didn't know what Mochi was. Now I know. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
delicious.
Yeah. Well, welcome Mochi. So that's lovely. So that's a lot of animals in a house. So good for you guys for having them.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little thing with you. It's called Middle Fingers Up. So I'm going to ask you share something that you would like to put your middle fingers up to.
Sure. So I put my middle finger up to the fact that sexuality is a taboo subject in our society. Our North American society and lots of other places in the world. And I just really hate that it is a taboo subject for a lot of people. I think it's really sad.
Yeah. Care to elaborate more? Because I think that's part of why we're talking today. That's part of why I asked you to be here. So I share that with you too. I didn't always share that though. I've come to discover, hey, wait a minute, we should be talking about this. So tell me more about that.
Sure. I believe that sexuality is just a part of the human experience. Like, we are sexual creatures. And I think because of, a number of factors like culture and religion and history and gender, we've created a construct that it's actually a taboo, like scary or shameful thing. So a lot of folks, they try to repress this very natural part of themselves, or they're scared of it, or they feel ashamed about it. And it's just so sad because in my experience, people feel very distressed. They can feel very distressed about their own sexuality or their sexual experience with partners or just in life. Sex as a topic is really distressing for a lot of folks. And that's really hard. It's hard to feel distressed about something that is such an innate part of who you are as a person.
Totally. Very well said. And everything you just said, we're going to break apart today in our conversation because I really like how you laid it out. And I really appreciate that. This whole conversation for me, comes from exactly what you said, this taboo. And I know that I'm not the only one because people are sort of like willing to hear at least me talk about it. I bring up sex in all sorts of ways all the time. At least in my culture, sometimes people are like, holy crap, like, lady, like, stop talking like that. And a lot of times for me, it's like, why? Like, I get, like, I'm not saying let's just all start talking about what we do in the bedroom. For some people, that's private. For some people, it's not. But it's more than just, like, today's talk is, for me, what I'm really excited about. It's going to be more than just about what happens in the bedroom because there's so many layers, wouldn't you say, to how we get to the bedroom? Like, so much more to sex than just having sex. Like, that's not all there is to it.
Yeah, absolutely. The topic of sexuality and intimacy is so deep and so nuanced, and it's so exciting because there's just so much to learn. I have so much to learn, and I focus on this. So
yeah,
it's a very deep topic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I think you'll kind of appreciate my middle finger because we don't, as you know, we don't talk about these things beforehand. And I always say, because I want to keep, and you and I have talked about this too, as we've been preparing, want to keep the conversation genuine on recording day. And so I never know what people are going to say, but my middle fingers up is sort of along the realms of what we're talking about today. I'm not sure if you've heard of the show on Netflix called Too Hot to Handle. I feel so embarrassed even saying this. Actually, it was a mutual friend. We both have a mutual friend. Recommended I watch this, and wouldn't be a show that I would normally watch. But I was like, "What? Why?" And they it was like kind of like their psychologist brain that was sort of like, it's like a really interesting social experiment. So I was like, okay, fine. So I watched. They suggested season 4. My middle fingers up is going to this friend actually. I'll let them stay anonymous, but for referring the show. But so they said watch season 4, which is how many seasons are out, and I'm done now. I've watched every single friggin' season, and it's a terrible show on one hand, but what is so fascinating about it to me is, they put a bunch of physically hot 20-something-year-olds from all over the world, UK, Africa, Canada, the States, everywhere. They go to this sexy location beach place. They have no idea what they're signing up for. They think they're signing up for one thing, so they can't wait to, get it on with all these other people. And then they find out when they get there that they can't actually have any kind of physical contact with anyone. And there's a bunch of money in the pot. And if people, say 2 people, decide to kiss or do anything more, money will be taken out of the pot. So it affects sort of everyone. So it's kind of an interesting social experiment. Who can restrain themselves, who not, and what comes out of it. And I know it's a reality show, and some of it maybe is scripted, some of it's not. But it is interesting watching some people, that the way they start off at the beginning of a season to where they end off. Some people, the whole point of the show is to help people understand that sex is more than a physical contact. And a lot of these young people that show up love sex. Some of them would say they're sex addicts. I don't really know how you become one, but that's what they would say. Maybe they are, they aren't. But the fact of the matter is they love having sex. And when they first meet someone, it's the physical connection that leads to a deeper one. And the point of the show is actually it should be the opposite for whatever reason. So I just think middle fingers up to my friend for making me get on this and waste my life on one hand. But on the other hand, I think it was kind of an interesting experiment. So I don't know. Have you seen it? Have you watched that show?
It's so funny you brought this up because I am also not usually into reality TV. That's not my go-to.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
But
I agree.
I discovered this show recently, one of my other friends, and at first I thought it was so dumb, but then I got really into it. I got really into it, you know, for similar reasons you're talking about. It is such an interesting human experiment.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, yeah, in the show I actually really appreciated, they had these, like, sex and relationship coaches who would do these workshops with the people on the show, and I thought the workshops were really cool. And if the people on the show really participated in the workshops, they actually grew, and that was the part that I just loved.
Yeah. Okay. So because I kind of feel that way too, but then I was like, well, I don't know, maybe it's fake, maybe not. But some people too that I even started, I was like, ugh, I don't even like this dude because he's just so weird about the sex and man and this and that. And then by the end of one season, I was like, oh my goodness, this person's like had a really big change. And it was kind of, it looked genuine watching it. So yeah. And, you know, in all sorts of, in those workshops, I agree, because all sorts of interesting topics that are very heavily connected to why these people feel the need to have a deep physical connection first. And, you know, like things like abandonment come up. You know, there's one person's talking about being adopted, never knowing their birth family, always wondering, why was I not good enough to be with you? And these are, you know, anyone that's experienced abandonment issues would maybe think, oh yeah, okay, like I didn't realize that, or I do see how these sorts of life experience pave the way to the bedroom, quote unquote, for me. Why I'm super disconnected, why I'm connected. And you know, that's what I really want to do with you today. So I again, thank you. And we listed off a lot of things you like to do in the sex room here, you know, in terms of like therapy with, you know, lots of with consensual stuff, with kink, with all this stuff. So hopefully we get to cover a lot of it. And I definitely have these questions that folks sent in, so I want to make sure that we get to cover those. So can I just start with like, you know, I work in the mental health field. I've worked alongside a lot of awesome therapists. Never in my life have I worked alongside or known a sex therapist. So how did you decide that was the path you wanted to take?
I love this question, and honestly, well, from a young age, I knew that I wanted to, like, help people. I have some childhood trauma background, and I really wanted to help people, specifically children at the time. I wanted to support children who were having a tough time because, you know, that's what I was going through. But as I grew older, that kind of developed. I knew I wanted to eventually go into psychology. And then I learned, like, oh, therapy is a thing. I started doing my own therapy, understanding more of what that meant. And then kind of parallel to that, I've always just been so curious about sexuality. And I grew up in a household where there was kind of some confusing messages about sexuality. On the one hand, I was told sexuality is this beautiful thing between partners, between married partners, specifically men and women. That was the message I got.
Moms and dads that love each other.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I got the message that it's, you know, sex in your body, that's something you need to protect because it can be taken from you. It can be a scary thing. I grew up in a household where my mom had experienced sexual trauma, and that influenced a lot of her teachings. So it was confusing because on one hand, sex was this beautiful, pleasurable thing, and on the other hand, it was scary.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I've always been really fascinated by it. And while I was in college, I got to take some courses like the sociology of sexuality and psychology of sexuality, and I just freaking loved it.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the topic. I loved talking about something that made other people uncomfortable. I just leaned into that and was like, this is my jam.
Right.
And then I eventually decided, okay, I want to be a therapist for sure, and I'm pretty sure I want to talk about sex. And like I'd done a bunch of Googling and figured out like, oh, some people do sex therapy. That sounds so cool. And I was in my master's program, which was actually at UBC in British Columbia.
Oh, good job.
Yeah.
Coming over to BC.
Yeah. So I did counseling psychology there. And it was a great program, but it was very traditional, very, very traditional. So I originally wanted to do a thesis about, which is a research paper on, I wanted to measure the fulfillment of couples who were in quote unquote vanilla relationships, like, you know, the norm, people have like normal sex, but that's vanilla.
Oh, that's what we call it. Okay.
The fulfillment. Yeah, versus the fulfillment of couples who are participating in like a kink relationship, which is like alternative sexual practices. I wanted to measure that because I was curious about the difference. And I couldn't find any support at my school for that topic. And I got some really weird reactions from professors. Like it was, you know, could be an unethical thing to study, or people seemed really scared of it and uncomfortable.
Why would the school or, you know, professionals, why would they deem that as potentially unethical? Why do you, did they tell you why, or do you know why?
I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know. One teacher was just like, this could be unethical.
That's very interesting.
And, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have, again, just like scary taboo ideas around like sex, let alone alternative sexual preferences, right? So that's even taking it further.
Totally. And can I ask you, where do you think that fear comes from? Because you just said some people have that fear or that the taboo of, oh no, sex is something bad.
I mean, I think it really depends on the person, but like in general, in our societies, it's a taboo topic. We get a lot of messages around like what sex is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like, and for whom.
What do you mean by whom?
And, well, you know, a woman, how is she supposed to show up during sex?
Right.
Or a man, or a person with a penis? How are they supposed to show up in sex? How are they supposed to look? How are they supposed to feel? How are they supposed to sound?
Yeah.
There's a lot of expectation that is placed on people, and people feel so anxious about that, like questioning, do I look like this? Do I show up like that? Should I sound like this? Mm-hmm. And that creates so much anxiety and so much fear. I think that's one place, but like on a micro level, there's a lot of messages that we teach our children sexuality is wrong, or it's something to be feared, or it can be used as an abuse, you know, a tool over other people as well.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is a form of power. Absolutely.
A form of power. And then, of course, religion. A lot of religions have some very strict messages around sexuality and, you know, how people are supposed to do it. And if you do it in a different way, does that mean you're sinful or you're going to go to hell?
Yeah. That makes me wonder, because my next question would be, what are the themes that a lot of religions are posing as why they feel sex is a taboo, sex is bad, or you don't talk about it or do it?
I think this is a really complicated question, so I'm totally simplifying things here.
Which I appreciate.
Because, like religion, there's really conservative churches or religions. There's less conservative churches and religions. So there's, this huge wide range. But the more conservative institutions, I think that they often preach that sex is for procreation between cisgendered, meaning you were born male and you identify as male, cisgendered male and female marriages. So sex is for those people only, and often only to procreate and have children.
Well, and that's how I learned. My household wasn't very religious, but we followed a lot of our cultural customs, and whether, so a lot of that, the culture and the values that came up from the religion exactly were, you have sex to have kids. That's sort of it. So then, like, that doesn't even consider people that, let's say, quote unquote, like, can't have kids, let alone that don't want to, right? Like, then you're not having sex. So you're only doing it for that. Yeah. We're going to be having an episode coming out pretty quick here with a therapist that we talked about, like, boundaries and teaching our kids at a young age what consent is and about the anatomy and all that too, right? So, like, you have that part to it too. So kids aren't really learning about all of that stuff. Those of us, whether it's a minority culture or folks that come from a religious background, there's a lot of, I feel, similarities in how we were all raised about it's hush hush. Like, if you are doing it for fun, that's not a conversation you're allowed to have. And then those bad things come out, right? You get labeled as sluts and whatever you want to call it. And you said certain genders, like, if it's the way that I grew up had a lot to do with how women were perceived, that women that wanted to or talked about having sex. And so it was, to be honest, by not talking about it, that's what sparked a lot of my curiosity growing up too. Like, I was very interested in why in our household we did, right? We didn't talk about it. And then like Bollywood movies. I don't know if you've ever seen a Bollywood movie, but man, there's the sexiest thing in the world. It's a bunch of Priyanka Chopras running around, dancing, singing sexy things, right? But yet we don't, it's so repressed at the same time. Like, we dance like that, we move like that, we dress like that. We very much own our body on one hand, but then on the other hand, we don't talk about the pleasure behind these things, and we're not allowed to. We have to hide our hips. We have to hide these things. I don't know. It's like, it's unfortunate because if we don't talk about it, especially those of us that have kids, then we're not going to break those cycles and those, violent patterns of aggression and abuse, and all of that happens. All of that breaks over years if we just make plans in our own household to teach our kids and teach ourselves to grow. We don't have to love it, but okay, be aware that it's happening. People are having sex in all sorts of different kinds of ways, and kids have access to social media on so many levels now. It's, we were laughing at the last episode that we had dial-up back then, if not encyclopedias, and now it's like everywhere, right? I appreciate that you say, let's talk about this. And can I ask, like, who would want to talk about it? So, like, who would show up? Like, do you have couples? Do you have individuals? Like, who would show up to want therapy?
Oh, yeah, all sorts of reasons. I see a lot of individuals who want to come in, and I'll list a few things, but this is not an exhaustive list, but sexual trauma, or people who have a hard time, their body's not functioning the way that they want it to. Some people, first let me clarify some language before I get into this.
Okay.
I want to be more gender inclusive in my language. So when I'm talking about, I'm not going to say man and woman because there's more genders than that. Yeah. So I'm going to say penis owners and vulva owners, which is a little bit more inclusive. So a penis owner sorry, but I know I'm working on not interrupting, but this is worth it. I have never heard of penis owners and vulva owners, and I just have to say that I love that. Like, it's very adorable. So thank you very much for sharing that. I love it. Because you're right. There's so many different, it's not a man having a penis anymore. There's lots of different identities is what you're saying now. Yeah, so some people who have a penis, they might not identify as a man. Some people who have vulvas don't identify as women.
Right.
We have a lot of genders in this world, and so I use that language just to be more inclusive.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me in.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for clarifying. And yeah, so people might come to me as individuals to work on body stuff, like when I want to have sex with my partner, my penis won't get hard, or it won't stay hard. Or maybe a vulva owner is having a hard time having an orgasm, or they have sexual pain with like sexual penetration. Or maybe they're just anxious to be in a relationship and they want help. They want to talk about it. They want to talk about their relationship, or they want to talk about exploring their gender. I do that a lot. They want to talk about, family history or sexual trauma. There's a lot of different reasons. And then for relationships, and again, I'm going to stay away from the word, I'll use it sometimes couples, but I also like to say relationships, people in relationships, because some couples is referring to usually a monogamous couple.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Two people in relationships. When I say I work with relationships, that's being inclusive to people who might be in a non-monogamous relationship, and there might be more than two people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. So I see folks in relationships who want to talk about increasing intimacy in the relationship. Yeah. Maybe they have not had sex in a really long time. Maybe there were some consent violations in their sexual relationship, and now they're like averse to, one person is averse to having sex with the other person, or maybe there was infidelity, and there's broken trust, and also sexual trauma that comes up in relationships too.
Right.
So there's a ton of reasons I might see people.
I think it's interesting because you just even ended with sexual trauma showing up in relationships. And I think what I find interesting in both my personal and professional experiences, I would say, would be that where trauma shows up first or is felt the most is in the bedroom. And so for some people that I've been around and have talked to or have worked with, that like getting, going to the bedroom and let's just say like having the good old fashioned sex, working backwards from there. And some people can't understand why that's not their thing. Like why, maybe for some people that's just not their thing. Like sex isn't for everyone. And there's all sorts of reasons why, but trauma has so much, I find, in stories to do with that. And it's hard to like, as someone that might be experiencing that, it might be hard to recognize that even, that why am I closed off in this area? Why do I not feel comfortable? Why don't I like this? And so I've noticed, like that is a first place at trauma. And would you see that too? Like, could you back that up?
Oh, definitely. And different kinds of trauma. So maybe someone experienced, sexual abuse as a kid, or they experienced sexual assault as an adult. There's also religious sexual trauma, which is something I come across pretty often. Is usually that's folks who grew up in very, very conservative religious beliefs, who demonized and shamed sex and bodies, and it has just created this like huge distress, shame reaction in people's bodies and in their minds and emotions, and they have a really hard time engaging in intimacy, like emotional or physical intimacy.
So when you have folks that come to you for what you just talked about right now, do they recognize that this is the link to what's happening? Or are they coming there thinking that there's something wrong with them and you're sort of helping them sort of sort this out?
I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
Some people see me and they already have a level of self-awareness, but they might be wondering,
yeah, right,
like, could this be contributing to what I'm experiencing now? Or some people, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have that awareness yet, and that's totally fine. I might gently guide them towards what I believe is happening for them, and I ask them. I never tell people, this is what's happening to you. I say, hey, I think this is what I'm seeing. What do you think about that? Does it fit your story?
Mm-hmm.
And I allow them to make that choice of whether or not they want to take on that label.
Right. Yeah, that can be helpful because when you're not clear or you're going through a mixed bag of emotions, you're definitely going to have a multiple wonderings of like, could it be because of this or that? And to have someone to bounce that off of, or in a safe place, be able to even help you come to that place, because sometimes even you saying it can validate it. People already know, like you said, or thinking it. And again, is it okay to say that out loud? And I think that's really helpful for you to kind of share that, because I think what we're talking about is going to give us further context about some of the other things, like who shows up. And really what I hear you saying is sort of anyone and everyone could show up and be sitting, with you or a fellow sex therapist. And sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that okay too. Like, is it okay that I say a sex therapist? Because I know it's more than that. So what should I be calling you?
Yeah, that's what I call myself.
Okay.
I'm a sex therapist. Yeah.
I love it. Okay.
Sex and
like,
intimacy.
Yeah. No. Okay. That's good. Do you see people, because you talked about people from different religion or religious backgrounds. Do you see people from different ethnicities or different like minority groupings?
I do. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a Caucasian person. So I think that it's like common for therapists to receive more clients who are like of similar background. But I do often see folks from other cultural, religious backgrounds too.
Yeah.
It's not the majority of my caseload, but I definitely do. And that's always like lovely for me. I feel so honored when that happens, because it can be scary to talk to someone who looks different or might have a different background than you, because we just want to be understood.
No, that's true. Yeah. But I also think that sometimes it's easier to have somebody from a different race or culture or what, because then it's like you can't judge me as closely. If I sitting in a room with a white therapist.
Yeah.
So my experience working in mental health, I'm not a therapist, but in the work that I've done, the capacity I've been in, I had the opportunity to mediate a lot of conversations in, Punjabi to English. And we always have to ask, because some families are like, I'd way rather not have this Indian woman, because chances are we might end up knowing each other. It's going to feel more disgraceful, because some families believe reaching out and getting help, right, is a bad thing. There's something wrong with them. So sometimes my experience, I've had clients that you would think would want to work with me be like, no, I'll take the white guy over there, or the Asian lady over there. So yeah, I think it's interesting. And maybe that is also like difference with you're in the States and we're in Canada. Sometimes like that plays a little bit of a difference too, with culture and background and that sort of thing. But regardless, I think the job is there because the need is there, and the need for us to start to talk about it or bring a level of awareness. And like, where do we want to have that level of awareness? Like, where, if I was listening today, what is something that you would suggest, a place you would suggest I could start to sort of unpack some of my own stuff? Where would you suggest would be a good place to just kind of start to think about?
That is a great question. And it's a hard question to answer, because it really depends on like what is it that you want to work on.
Yeah.
Sex in general, I think, this is a tough question. There are some, like, if you're not ready to jump into therapy because it's, a little scary, or it might be too vulnerable, or maybe you can't, like, it's out of your financial means to do that. There's a lot of great books out there, written by therapists and professionals.
Okay.
If you're into reading, and a lot of those books are available in audio form now too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, books could be a really good resource for people.
Even the therapist that was here the other day too talking about some of the stuff too.
Yeah.
She listed a few books too, because she's like, sometimes we take the public library for granted and it's free and we have access to a lot of, like you said, audiobooks or books to just sort of help us in a private way start to understand some things. And so she listed some books on how to talk about consent with kids. So yeah, if you have any, let us know. Or by the time that we're going to put the show, air the show or whatnot.
Yeah.
Or the episode. So
definitely.
Can we talk a little bit about, let's talk about relationships for a second. So I've had some questions from folks about, and they all sort of stem in the relationship department. So when one partner may have, be going through like a dry spell. So what is a dry spell and how does that happen? And more importantly, maybe some tips on how to communicate that to your partner, or to communicate to a partner that you're noticing is not really interested in engaging in physical contact at this time. Do you have any suggestions, or maybe even some knowledge on how does that happen? How would I get there?
Yeah, I think I have a clarifying question first.
Yeah.
Like, in this scenario, have these people had an engaging sex life before the dry spell, or has it always been kind of off?
That's a good question for folks to consider. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think my answer would be different.
Okay.
Depending on the scenario.
Should we cover both, or few, or
sure?
Whatever? Like let's, a few
let's
things.
Do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the scenario that sex has always been a challenge. Okay. It's always been a struggle. In this scenario, people often have a really hard time even talking about sex or, your intimate desires. And when I say intimacy, like emotional intimacy too. These folks typically have a hard time connecting in general. So if you're having a hard time, like, connecting emotionally, spending positive, fulfillment, or let me back up. If you're having a hard time having connective moments with your partner in general, and how could you expect your sex life to be the way that you want it to be?
Okay, so can I ask a question before you move on with that?
Yeah.
I think I'm really glad you brought this up, because I think, and even if we go back to that Too Hot to Handle show, people don't connect the two. There are people that believe emotional and physical connection is separate. In fact, like, I've, unfortunately, it's sad, been around people, multiple people, who have sort of grown up with this understanding that you have an emotional connection to your spouse or your long-term relationship person here. And most times it's their spouse, but you don't connect both. You don't have a physical and emotional. So you might have you really love your partner, but you're not going to be doing the dirty and have really exciting sex with them. And then that's where the door to infidelity opens for some of those folks, unfortunately, that I've kind of been around seeing. And then there's folks that think you can't like, it's embarrassing to have both. So, like, the sex is okay, lights off, because it kind of goes back to what you were saying, like these childhood, like our worldview is developed throughout childhood and really kind of sits in our adolescent years, right? And then going into adulthood. And so for a lot of people growing up, it's like you don't do it. So when you do it, lights are off, you don't look at each other, you just do it. And there's no foreplay, there's no emotional emotional stimulation. It's just you do it and then you're done. And and a lot of times the male partner is the dominant one, so gets to decide when that happens too. So you don't really have a choice for some people.
Yeah.
So there's it's like this big space has opened up, because that's just like some of my experiences, like around people and folks and people have talked about, but like I'm sure there's more, and I'm sure you've seen different or what. So I think it'd be good to talk a little bit more about what is emotional intimacy? How do you build that in a relationship?
One thing I think I'd like to mention before diving into that is it's so important, and I'd say this is step number 1 for anybody that has questions is asking yourself, what do I want? What do I want in my sex life? Am I interested in sex? Do I want to have sex by myself? Do I want to have sex with my partner? Or do I not? Like, maybe you don't want sex at all, and that's okay. It's okay if you want that. You know, some folks identify as asexual, or sex is not a big part of their life, and like that choice is a valid choice. Yeah, and then, you know, if your answer is, actually, I do want to have a sexual relationship with my partner and myself, okay, great. Then you can go forward and start asking some other questions, like you're asking me. How do we approach this?
Yeah.
One of my goals with my clients is to just normalize talking about sex. Like, how cool would it be if we could talk about sex the way that we talk about what are we going to have for dinner?
Oh, okay. I like this.
Right? It's so normal. It's so easy. It's just like a topic. It's just a topic we talk about. How cool if we could normalize talking about sex in relationships like that. And that's something that I really try to help folks work towards, because there's just so much freaking anxiety and fear around talking about sex, and that gets in our way all the time.
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very light way to sort of just dip your feet in as an individual and ask yourself that and reflect on that. I think that's well said, because even as you're asking that, I'm like, oh yeah, thinking about that in my head too. What does that mean when you're saying, you're talking about it about the weather, about food, about everyday, it's like an essential, it's a basic need. And so how do we fulfill it? And that would be cool. I think that would also, like, beyond cool. I think that would, like you said, when there's so much anxiety and so much fear and so much stress around it, like, that opens the door to managing so much of that anxiety that maybe now is kind of coming out through physical pains. Maybe it's like impacting people's even the emotional level now of the relationship, because one person, like you described, may be asexual or may be experiencing a dry spell, or just, you know, because like we haven't even tapped into hormones yet. I'm sure that plays a part, right, as well. And so if I'm over here in that corner, and my partner's in this other corner of their sex drive is like at the highest it's ever been, it's peaking, I can imagine that would cause a lot of disturbance or turbulence in a relationship. And would you see couples in that kind of place to talk about that comes up?
I definitely do. We call it desire discrepancies. Which is when desire discrepancies, when one person wants something different than the other person. They're like different sexual desires. And, you know, this is addressing your original question, like, what do we do in these situations when someone wants something different than the other person? And I would say communication is just the foundation of all of this. Like, we have to learn how to talk about our wants and desires and our thoughts around sexuality.
Yes.
If we don't, like, I don't know how else we would do it, right?
Well, and you're right. I agree. And so, like, you know, we started out talking about sex in the bedroom, and now we're all the way out to communication. And it's almost like, okay, that's the beginning to getting to the bedroom. And so when we talk about communication, like, would you recommend that if people are dating or seeing other people or exploring their sexuality, that this is a conversation that comes up early? Because you don't always know if you're going to, like, you might just want to go hang out with someone versus date people versus you're coming out of a long, there's all sorts of things. So is this something that you would recommend? Like, just like you said, if it's talking about what we're going to eat, then we I'm guessing I'm hearing you say, maybe I'm answering myself, that it can be talked about in the first conversation. If we're going for drinks and we talk about what does sex mean to you? I don't know. Like, is that normal to do?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think if that's what you want, back to that question, what do I want? I think there's so much value in knowing what you want, number one, and being able to express it to another person. Mm-hmm. So that might be, I freaking love sex and I want to have sex on the first date.
Yeah, right.
That might be, I'm not looking for a sex-based relationship.
Right.
I really want to focus on the emotion right now and make that deep connection, and then I might be interested in sex.
Right. And then all the things in between. Yeah.
And all the things in between. So being able to identify what you want and express that, I think there's definitely value in telling that to someone in your early stages of relationship.
Well, and because like what you're also doing is discussing consent right there too. That this is how I value sex, or this is how I see it. I'm interested, I'm not, I prefer this, or I need this before I get that. And I think it allows both people to get clear and establish a boundary right off the bat. And I think it can be helpful. And I really hope we're there. And I hope when my kids are at the age and place where they're going to be exploring that they too in their generation feel comfortable having this conversation, because I think it takes a lot of the unnecessary out of the picture, especially when we're talking about sexual violence, right? Like teaching kids at such a young age to how to talk about, when to talk about it, and have these things. And I also see like a lot of young couples that are just getting ready to get married or maybe move in together, or what the next step is. And when the whole taboo of the honeymooning. So when you're first dating, you can't keep your hands off each other. And for some couples, it doesn't take much time, or it takes years, or whenever they get to a place where it's not that way anymore. It's, we've been together, we have kids, we have different priorities and those kinds of things. And so sometimes there's you see it in movies all the time. When you see the hot hero and and the heroine's side friend that is always like, I don't have sex sucks, don't have, like, it's just, when you get to that place in a relationship, it's not necessary. And I think that creates a lot of turmoil for people. And I worry about that for some people, because I've been in conversations, and my own experience, brings a lot of that to the table too, in the sense of, like, my husband and I have been together for 22 years. And so we've been together for a long time, and I don't think we would have made it this far and feel like we're in a very healthy relationship if we didn't communicate and figure out what intimacy means to us. And it changes over the lifespan, right?
Right.
So where you're at in your 20s versus your 30s, or right, 5 months into a relationship, pre-kids, post-kids, hormones, this and that. What's your thoughts
totally.
about that? Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about, like, relationship stages and how sex changes over time. And let's come back to that. I just want to touch on something you said previously.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were talking about, this culture of silence that we live in our families. Families are often very silent about sex and don't teach their kids very much, rely on schools to teach them mostly.
Right.
Or just in society too. Like, shh, don't talk about that. That's awful. Or you're a slut if you talk about that. This culture of silence, I think, is a really big part of the fear around sex. And you asked me that earlier. Where does the fear come from? Mm-hmm. I think it has a lot to do with that. When we're kids, if there's a lot of, like, shh, don't talk about that. Oh my gosh, don't touch your body. What are you doing? Those types of messages. It becomes scary. You're like, oh shit. I shouldn't be touching my body. This shouldn't be feeling good. What's wrong with me?
Well, that must impact your self-esteem and how you're building your identity. Because, like, biologically certain, early adolescence, whenever it happens, adolescence, like you also have like an urge, like, you're either getting a hard on, right? And need to relieve that or want to, or curious, but then you're being told that you're dirty or that's bad or don't talk about it or what, like what can that do for somebody, and how it like, can that skew their sort of understanding? And like do you see that? You see people hey,
so much shame, so much distress, so much repression, and specifically about little kids. Some people might have a really hard time hearing this, but I'm going to say it. Little children are sexual beings, and our bodies, our physical bodies, will respond with arousal from, even infants. Our bodies physically respond to arousal when things feel good. And as soon as a little kid's arms are long enough to touch their genitals, they will touch themselves because it feels good.
Right, yeah.
Right. So a lot of people do not want to think about that.
You know what,
it makes them feel uncomfortable.
It does, because I know even in my culture, you're right, because I'm like, oh yeah, like I've seen babies do that, my own kids do that exactly. Yeah. And then we're always joking, and in my language you'll say things like, oh, you're so ganda, which means dirty, you're so dirty, like, but you're laughing about it because it's a kid, so you're not being angry yet. You wait until they're a little older. But we already start, and I like, as a joke, because I grew up with that, and so it's a funny hee joke, so it's like, exactly. So now I'm putting that in my kid's mind that this is bad, they're dirty or whatnot, and then that might invite or uninvite my child to ever want to come and ask me questions, right? And even questions around medical, like if they're having pain or something too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, well, that's not your fault. It's not something you're doing on purpose. You're just a product of your cultural and familial system, and that's where you learn that too. But yeah, kids from a very, very young age learn that their bodies are dirty, shameful things, and it does cause a lot of distress and fear. Yeah.
And I wonder if, like, that's just now, okay, I've been told this is gross, or I'm bad, or I can't, masturbate, or whatever it is. So these little things get put in the emotional and physical intimacy buckets that we may not even revisit until we're now adults about to engage in a relationship or explore something, and we're like, oh, what is this, and like, sort of like, that's my hope for this conversation, is for those of us listening, or as we educate ourselves, like, how did let's work backwards to why I have a great sex life, to why I don't, to why whatever we want to think about, like, how did we get there? And even all of these podcasts have been about our own level of awareness and awakening, so we can do better and be better. Yeah. And the sex part's always like the lights are off in that area. And so I really like how you're helping us, go back to childhood, and these sorts of things connect the dots to when, as we get older, in the stronger views we ourselves start to believe and live out about what sex means to us.
Yeah. And we, like I said, we start this stuff so early on, these messages. And a topic that we haven't talked too much about is gender. Yeah. Which influences intimacy and connection like a huge scale.
Right.
So, for example, these stats are based in the U.S. I don't know about Canada or any other place in the world, but I wonder if it'd be similar.
Yeah.
On average, little boys and penis owners, they stop receiving physical affection in their homes around the age of 6.
Oh.
They get less hugs, less kisses, less holding, less...
So this is for little boys and penis owners.
Little boys and penis owners.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
Because, there's this idea that, they're gonna be men, and they need to be hard, and they need to be able to take care of themselves and self-reliant. So we place these things on these little children. They're so young. And so these little people grow up, they start to turn inwards for, their emotional support because they stop getting it outwards. And it sets them up to believe that where they get their physical intimacy is through sex only. So a lot of these people, they don't learn how to be physically affectionate. Hugging, kissing, massages, cuddling. They will often rely mostly on sex like penis and vagina penetration sex, not knowing that they might actually be wanting like physical affection and they want connection.
Right.
And that's the only way they know how to get it, and that's what's seen as like quote unquote manly in our society.
Yeah. I'm still stuck at early, age 6, like that you're just a newbie, and that's a long time to pave a very, very distinct, right? This is how it's going to be. And you're right. You do see that a lot. And the way that you just like what you're talking about too, in so many ways, touches on toxic masculinity. Like it's such a nice but sad example of how some boys or penis owners, you got me, now saying this too, get to this place in their adult life where it's just so hard and it's ingrained now. I can't talk, I can't emotionally cuddle, I can't connect because it's going to impact them as a parent, as a partner, as a son, as whoever they identify as. And I think that's sad because it's not just about sex. It's and you know what? This is so crappy that I'm doing this, but I'm going to go back to Too Hot to Handle because in season 3 they did that with Nathan, the one guy that was there who he and his love interest on the show cost the group half the pot. It was like $100,000 because they just couldn't keep their hands off each other, and so he gets taken to this little secluded island with one of the facilitators, right? And they're doing a lot of emotional, like how do you connect the heart and to the body, to the brain versus it's just the penis too. What are some other ways that you can identify as what it is to be a man? And so it's interesting because you're right. Like it's probably, I would imagine he's an example of what a lot of people would relate to. And then you throw other parts of social media and music and all those, all that sort of culture in there too, and that just amplifies it on so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to, say, I'm not saying that, if you just want to like have sex or you just want to fuck because it feels good, that's not a bad thing.
I think we just found the title of the name of the ep. You just named it right there. Good, well done, sex therapist.
Awesome. Yeah, like this is not a bad thing. I do not want to shame that. Like that's fun. Great. What I'm saying is there can be more. If you want that, but what is sad is if someone doesn't know how to tap into their emotional selves, their intimate selves, and explore other types of affection and sexuality. Well, and all they know how to do is fuck.
Can we talk about that? Because then what I see happens, and I don't know if you see happen, is substance use gets put in to help assist the emotional connection. So if I drink, first of all, it feels good, and when I drink or if I use certain drugs, I have no problem hugging you, and I have no problem touching. I wanted to touch you more, and now I'm going to do this more. I'm going to use the substance more because that felt good. And I think I wonder how many people out there talk their truth and their sadness and their feelings and all those things when they're under the influence. And when people least, nobody's going to remember this conversation tomorrow. You're not going to remember it, but all this stuff came out, and then the aggression sometimes follows too. And it's not necessarily about sex in that moment or in that time, but it is about, it's hard to get the feelings out and to talk about them, whether it be just that I like this person or I like this or this is who I am. But like you said, all of this can be healthy if we can find a way to find a healthy communication pattern. And some of us get that, some of us don't, and some of us have to, sort of change that throughout the lifespan. But do you see that? Do you see clients that now are utilizing supplementing with substances to be able to connect on that in that way, or connect the two with physical and emotional?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I had a conversation with a client about this really recently. Because, people are doing like dry January. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this would affect my intimate connection with my partner. Yeah, it's so interesting. And let's be real, substances and alcohol, they are great dopamine boosts. Number one, they feel good. And number two, they often do take down those walls real fast. And suddenly we feel good and we feel okay being vulnerable and expressing more and touching more and being on that level with another person.
Yeah.
And that's how drugs and alcohol, part. I'm totally being reductionist here, but
well, I think it's not really being one or the other. I don't view it that. I think we're just talking about there are so many different roads that we as humans can take and find ourselves on, and sometimes those work for us and sometimes they don't. And I think it's like all about whatever I'm doing. Is it safe? Am I hurting myself? Am I hurting someone else? I think sometimes those are just basic safety questions to ask ourselves when we're making decisions. And on the topic of substance use, I think it is that's difficult. That's difficult because I've seen it on, we've all been part of it, or we've seen it in our 20s and whenever, going to parties or hanging out with people and somebody's had too much, and some of the stuff, whether it's an emotional talk or it's someone trying to get handsy with someone or whatnot. It's like a whole mess of things, and it's too bad we can't.
It gets messy.
It does. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know. I think for me, as we've been talking, some of the things that I'm sort of recognizing too is, yes, it starts young, but you can always go back and reteach yourself. A lot of what you're talking about is a self-awareness and asking yourself, like, what does this value mean to me? So what does the value of sex, what is sex to me? How do I identify with it? And okay, what's the next thing? Can I talk about that with someone? And if I can't, why is that? What do I need to get there? Is that okay? And if I can talk to someone about it, great. Okay, that will lead to whatever it is that is going to be helpful, or with our partners or whoever we engage with. So yeah,
right. And this might be a good segue into the thing I said way back. We'll come back to
which one? There's so many.
Like the relationship stages.
Yeah.
I hear this a lot. People say, at first, our sex life was awesome. It was so much fun. And now it's like non-existent. I don't know what's happening. I think that's normal because in the first approximately 6 to 12 months of a relationship, it's new, it's novel, it's fun. You're also kind of flooded with endorphins.
Oh.
And that's the butterflies. That's the excitement, the endorphins.
Yes.
And so sex is a lot more steamy and exciting, and this is a new person, and, those things are exciting. And then over time, like, this person is less new, our sex is less new, it's less exciting, I know what's going to happen. Yeah. And also, the chemicals change, so the endorphins get way less, and the oxytocin comes into play, and that's like a bonding hormone. Okay, so can you tell us, because
oxytocin is also something that happens when you're having a baby, so okay, so that's the same hormone, that's the same.
It is more about like bonding and getting close and feeling close.
That excitement that we feel when we like are going on vacation or ordering something fun on the menu or whatever it is. It's like that experience, going on the roller coaster, even like those nerves, like those like those feelings. So you're saying that changes over time. So what?
Yeah.
How does oxytocin make you feel? When does that happen? What's that? Why does that change? How does that come out?
How and why that happens? It's just a natural thing that happens. I mean, behavioralists would say because, once the couple has the babies, then they have to stay together to like protect the baby so they can grow. That's very like a behavioralist perspective. I think, this is just totally my opinion, that it happens, like we have this bonding stage with the endorphins. Get excited about this person or people.
Yeah.
To want to be with them, to spend some time with them, to have some fun. And then relationships change, right? Like the newness goes away and you start talking about different topics.
Yeah.
Like, do we want to live together?
Right.
Do we want to have kids? Do we want to travel? Like, how do we want to live our lives and relationship together? And oftentimes those things are less, quote unquote, exciting and fun. And it's just a different phase, But we still want to feel good together, and we still want to feel bonded and connected. And like, there's some oxytocin. That feels nice.
So there's a release there, and so it's what I'm hearing from you. It has to do with connecting, because if we're feeling it at birth, if we're feeling it hormone release and orgasm or wherever, then it is about that connection, what's happening together in the moment and that sort of thing. And so what other things do you know about oxytocin that, like, is there things that people can do to activate that, or to, like draw that feeling out? Do you, without having a baby and having sex? Because some people are like, listen, I don't want to give birth. And some people might be like, listen, I don't want to have sex. Like, so how do I feel these things with my partner or with myself even? Like, let's just even start with self, right? Like, we don't have to do these things. We don't have to feel good because we have someone in the room with us. We can feel good by ourselves and whatever situation that is. So how can I feel that, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. How can you feel like connection, like even by yourself? It's making me think about love languages and everyone has different love languages.
Yes.
A lot of people talk about the 5 love languages, but there's so many more. That's not just inclusive. If you want to talk about how do you connect to yourself, I say like date yourself.
Date yourself. Oh.
Date yourself. Take yourself to your favorite restaurant. Go shopping. Get yourself a present. Do like self-massage. Take a bath. Wear something that feels sexy on your body. Listen to some great music. Go on a solo trip, or like go take yourself to the park. Just be really nice and kind to yourself. Yeah.
These are things that totally bring out self-compassion. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when we feel that towards ourselves, there is like a bit of that release. There is that moment. You have a proud moment. You graduate, you get accepted somewhere, like a job or whatnot. You can't afford to buy that thing. What all these little things that we do totally do generate that. And as well, there's a balance that's needed, because some of us can be excessive with their shopping or some of the other things. And so, like sex too, there's a balance of what's healthy and what might be something that we might want to explore further about. Do I need to sort of get some help with this thing, or am I doing this to fulfill something else or whatnot? But we're not talking about that necessarily. We're talking about ways that we can look after ourselves and take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Totally. So I actually do recommend it to people in relationships who are, oftentimes people come in and they're feeling so defeated. Yeah. And they're unhappy and they're just looking for this fulfillment in their relationship and they're not getting it. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like, what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing that makes you feel good for your body, your mind, your spirit? Are you seeing your friends? Are you doing self-care? Like, I do recommend that to people who are struggling in relationship. Like, turn all that focus on your relationship. Turn some of that inward. Yeah. Make yourself happy and find your own joy and pleasure in life.
Yeah.
Because we cannot rely on another person for that to happen.
No, and we try to teach kids that language around filling their bucket and ways that you can take care of other people and fill your bucket, but also ultimately starting with yourself. And I think that's an important message. Is we get lost, especially if we're in relationships and we have children, we have family members we're taking care of, we have jobs, and for certain women even, we're raised to take care of everyone else, and then our needs are taken care of. And so there's often guilt and for treating myself, quote unquote, or doing that thing, because it's like we think, oh, I could have done that, or I should have done that. And I think of even like stay-at-home parents that where maybe they don't even have the income, their partner's bringing the income in, and you have to figure out how do you share who does what. And you're bringing the money in and I'm taking care of the household, but like, how do we share that? Because when I made that dinner, I made it for you too. So when you bring home the money, right, I think people have to sort of, Carrie and I had to figure that out recently too, when I stopped working and bringing in the big bucks. So it's like, okay, well, how do we balance this out? And without feeling like this is your money, this is ours, how do we do this? And I had also put away a lot of money before I left too, because I do feel like, as for myself, I need, women, we really do need to be financially stable, is like a big belief of mine. But with all that, I think it's like, okay, taking care of yourself can mean lots of different things. It doesn't have to be expensive or whatnot. I know in our long relationship, 20, however many years I said we've been in, it's what I found has been so successful is it just feels honestly like we get stronger and stronger. We enjoy our time together. And a lot of it over the years had to do with exactly what you said, figuring out, who am I outside of you? Who am I outside of being a parent? And now recently I'm doing, who am I outside of this career? So I think when we can find ourselves in that way, we bring more strength, whether it be to our children, our family members, our job, or our partners. But it's not easy to start with yourself, I think, because we're taught not to. And I think that
totally.
So what are there some things that your clients have taught you over the years, or that you've sort of discovered too, that could be helpful for folks that maybe are listening that want to start with themselves and take care of themselves and do something for themselves? Like where's one place they can start, or a question? You're good at that. Ask yourself this, or is there a question that they could ask?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this is something that I've been working on for a long time, and it's been a huge struggle for me because I was one of those people who just put all of my eggs in my relationship basket, and I totally forgot about myself. And all of my happiness and joy came from that relationship. And then, when things weren't going well in that relationship, I was a disaster, and I would, crumble. And so this is something I've been working on, personal project. And what has helped me, and things that I suggest to clients as well, is like back to that question, the core question: what do I want in any given moment of my day? What do I want in this moment? Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I'm really tired and I need a nap. Oh, I'm feeling lonely. I think I need to make plans with my friends. I want to go on a walk and move my body. Like, that question is so fundamental to me. Yeah. And if you can start to practice asking yourself, what do I want? And your answer has nothing to do with changing another person's behavior.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
So, for example, if I say, well, what do I want in this moment? I want my partner to listen to me more and let me know that he cares. Right. Well, it's okay that you want that, but you can't change that. You can't change anyone's behavior. So if what you are focusing on is someone else's behavior, you're going to be really disappointed because you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So focusing on yourself and the things that you can change, that is the key. What can I do to fulfill myself?
Yeah, I like that. I think it does answer when I ask myself, what do I want? And let's say it is, I want my partner to, tell me I'm great at this thing or whatever. I think, you're right. I can't control them. I can be in charge of what I'm going to do. I can also answer that by saying, okay, I'm going to communicate that clearly to them. I'm going to ask them for that too, because I think you're right. Like it is, what is it that I'm able to do? And maybe I'm also not communicating in the right way, that's what I need more from them, or I want less of this. And so sometimes we wait when we're in long-term relationships, we wait for the other person to do all the things that we want them to. And, sometimes some of us are nasty about it and tell them in passive aggressive ways and whatnot. And we all have we all know what we do and how we do that, right? When we're not at our best. But I think you're right that it's attunement to myself. It's self-awareness. It's what do I need to do to be responsible for myself? And I really appreciate you say that, because every single episode that we have done so far, all of the guests in their own way have said exactly that when they share their personal stories. When I've had professionals on, it's how do you start with yourself and figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do that or communicate that. And yeah, that's well said. Yeah. I can't control the other people around me.
Yeah, and I think it's, back to sex. Like, knowing what you want in terms of sex and pleasure and intimacy is so empowering, and it can be so much fun and exciting, even if you're not going to share it with anybody, but
Well, yeah.
That's awesome.
And so if I'm someone that's at a place where I want to be brave and I want to have more fun, like I want to be able to say, I want to have more fun in the bedroom, or wherever it is. I just watched recently how to build a sex room or something like that on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's like the Moira Rose, so the mom from Schitt's Creek. It's like the Moira Rose of design. She's this chic British lady who goes and meets with people about, and actually this is funny, the same friend that I was throwing my middle fingers up to earlier in the show suggested this show to me too, and I watched it. But the first episode though, I was like, this is so stupid. Like, ew, like why am I watching this? I don't really care if people want sex rooms. Like, I'm not interested in that. And then of course I can't stop watching it, and I start to realize, oh my gosh, like you have no idea. Like, you can't stereotype and judge people's sexual lives. Like, we're not in that. We've changed so much, and I just really want people to join us and catch up, because you have couples, you have partners, you have people from all sorts of different cultures and ages and genders and all this sort of stuff, that at the end of the day, it's not about being nasty and dirty and whatever people want to call it. It's like we want a space that's ours to connect in, and it's like a lot of it has to do with what your emotional intimacy, emotional connection, to then enjoy safely some of the other things. And I wonder actually if this is a good segue to get into some of the things that you practice or that you know about, because you, in your bio, we talked a little bit, you understand kink and what is it, I remember you were teaching me BDSM, some other stuff. Yeah. I'm like trying to find on my notes. BDSM. So that's bondage, discipline, and dominant, submissive, and what is it? Sadism and
masochism.
So close. You think when you're watching that show that it's all about bondage and all that, and in fact it's way more than that. It's really neat. But there is sexy talk about like some of the couples, the things that they want that go beyond handcuffs and whatnot. And so can we talk a little bit about that? Like this is an interesting area. So how do people go from never being interested, never wanting, for all sorts of reasons, having sex, to that part of the sex world?
Sure. So I like to say sexuality is a spectrum. You know, if you could see like a rainbow, that shape of a rainbow, the arc, there's like people on the left who are like, you know, they're really satisfied and they love vanilla sex, which is, you know, what the quote unquote normal sex, you know, like guy on top. We don't use toys, we don't use any like kinky stuff, and like that's vanilla. And some people like they love that. That is their jam. Fantastic. And then there, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, there could be things that other people might find scary or different, using just quote unquote here, but things like blood play, for example, like blood turns them on, or they find it sensual, or like suspension. People who would you get like wrapped up in rope and they feel really like beautiful and contained, and then you like suspend them from the ceiling. Those are just some examples of different types of like alternative sexual practices, but there's so much out there. If you want to learn more about that, like just Google like different types of kink and BDSM. There's a lot of different stuff out there. It's very, very broad and varied. And they're all natural. They're all healthy. They're all beautiful expressions of human sexuality. As long as you are happy and fulfilled and you feel pleasure and joy out of your sexual practices, go for it.
Well, I think that's helpful for folks to hear. I'm curious, like, how much that people believe in that, though. Like, it's like, yeah, no, thank you for that, but like, truly believe that engaging in alternative
sexual,
right? Yeah. So, like, for example, when I don't know if you've talked to clients that engage in the alternatives or not, but is there like, I guess my question is like, is there like a theme in what most of the folks that you know that have engaged in the alternative sexual preferences, what would they say is sort of like what brings them back to wanting to do that, like to be tied up in that way or to be suspended that way, or you know, putting on the sexy leather bandages and being spanked, and you know, there's from How to Build a Sex Room, I learned about a lot of cool functions and things people can and want to do, or even using toys, even using toys, right? Like you said. So how do people decide that they love the vanilla sex and that's great, but maybe they want to try something like that and don't know how to ask their partner, or to go to, like, how do you do that? How does someone just go ahead, and do you go buy suspension ropes at Home Depot, or like, where do you go? What do you do? How do you figure it out?
Well, I feel like your question has two parts. Like, firstly, how do you know? How do you know that this is something that you like and that you're into? And then how do you do it, and how do you approach it? Like, applicably. So I'll start with the first one. We all, as human beings, have what is called a sexual template. And essentially it's kind of like a roadmap. When you're born as a little baby, your car gets put on the map and you're exposed to various stimuli. Could be the wind, could be a parent's touch, could be clothes, food, things that you see, that you hear, all these different stimulations. Our brains as infants, they're constantly assessing what feels good, what does not feel good. And a lot of those things that feel good, they get registered as something that is arousing. And that gets put on your map, on your sexual template. And that is why sexual preferences are so widely varied, because all of our experiences are completely unique, right?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think, like, before hearing you say that, it's like, it's so simple. Like, you put that in the simplest way, but yet it's so much more complicated, because it's like you're trunk of your car is getting full now with all of these experiences and sensations and sorts of things that we register that we enjoy or we don't or whatnot. And then it would change, I would imagine, as we learn new touches and new, sensations as we get older or whatnot. Or something maybe traumatic happens to us and we're like, okay, that's not my thing anymore. I'm not into that thing over there because it brings back this bad memory or whatnot. And it makes so much sense when you talked earlier about that it's so important for us as humans to really, really invest in our self-awareness and do those regular, life scans, mental scans, body scans, whatever we want to call them, to sort of check in where we're at and what we need, because you don't even know when you describe, the little baby in the car, the baby doesn't even know until it's way older that I like those things or I don't, like it's just it's through their subconscious in many ways before they start to build that. And so half the time you don't even realize it. And part of why I asked my 6-part question, I'm glad you caught that because I do that sometimes without realizing it, is because I think just you do such a nice job really sending the message of healthy has so many opportunities, right? Healthy also, there's healthy, but also what's normal. Normal has so many options. Like it's not one thing over here. There's lots of different parts of that. And I think it's helpful to hear from someone like you that that's okay, or it's okay to explore that or lean into it, as you said earlier, because it's there for a reason. It's coming up for a reason. And walking towards it and exploring it can help us in all sorts of, can help us even connect better to other people and individuals. So the putting it away, I think it's going to build up, because that car that you describe as a little baby I'm driving in, it's the same car I'm going to have from birth until I pass, and it's going to fill up, right, with a lot of stuff that I got to either learn how to sift out.
Yeah, our sexual preferences they're our own, they're unique. The thing to know about it is that we generally can't erase them. So if you have something that you don't like or that you find disturbing or shameful, like usually we can't get rid of those things. We just like them. They're a part of our psyche and who we are. Can you help yourself come to terms with that and live with it in a curious way? Be curious about that part of yourself. Oh, why do I like this? Where do I think it came from? How could it benefit my life? How could it bring me joy? Ask yourself those types of curious questions about your sexual preferences. And just know that you can add stuff to your sexual template.
Right. It's like
so usually we can't take away, but we can add new stuff to our sexual templates. And that's exciting because there's so much to explore by ourselves and with partners. Yeah,
I would agree. And I think if there, when you say there's so much to explore with ourselves or our partner, so if one of the questions that was sent in was, so if somebody wants to be able to have that kind of a conversation with their partner, that maybe they want to explore something with their partner in the bedroom, or they want to stop doing something, are there some suggestions in how people can bring that up to their partner?
What I suggest to people is, so this takes vulnerability. So can you get brave? Find your brave part in your body. Ground yourself to the floor, feel your feet on the floor. Imagine that you're a tree and you have roots and you are strong. Take some really deep, deep breaths. And then once you're ready to be vulnerable, express yourself to your partner. So, for example, I like to do soft landings, which means saying something nice to your partner, like, hey, I really want to talk to you about something that's important to me because I really want to connect with you on this deeper level. I really want to share this deep intimacy with you, and that's why I want to bring this up. You're saying something connective.
Right.
how do you want to connect with this person? Let them know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it works for both scenarios. Like, I really want to connect with you deeply in the bedroom, and there's this thing that we're doing that I feel uncomfortable about, and I'd really appreciate it if we could talk about it. Or I really desire you, and I want to do like some fun stuff together, and I really wanted to look at this sex toy store online to get some ideas. Would you feel open to that with me?
Mm-hmm.
So, it takes vulnerability.
It does, yeah.
It can be scary. But if you don't put yourself out there at all, nothing will change and it will stay the same.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and I think how we can help each other in the scenarios we're talking. So if this is something we want to talk to our partners about, I think both partners can also start to share with each other what you like. And that doesn't have to be something in the bedroom, but also like like you're saying, like soft landing, part of that is doing it in a way that your partner wants to hear. Sometimes people or partners don't feel like they're hearing, and that might go back to the love language validation or things that they're doing well, and then that also translates in the bedroom. And so if you come from a culture where, again, sex is a taboo, you're not supposed to talk about it, and if you're a woman, you're really not supposed to, and then it's like you feel confused or scared and you don't know what if you're doing. Like someone had sent in a question saying like, I don't feel confident in the bedroom, but I really want to explore more things, but I feel embarrassed to talk about it. And so I think it can, to help us get to that place where you're at of saying, having this soft conversation, it's also helpful for partners to tell each other what they like. Like, I really like that you did that. I really like that you scratched my head today. I really like that, you put your arm around me, and then working our way to, okay, I really like that. And I think, especially if we're in a relationship, and maybe this is now like personal opinion over here, but if we're in a relationship and our intent is to stay together and grow and be healthy, then that vulnerability is so worth it. Pride and all that, lovely. How do we work through that? Because we genuinely, what we're saying is we want to build a better connection with our partner. That's a really good thing. That's a really healthy thing. People will be thriving if we are having healthy relationships. And if there's children in that household, even better for children to be in a household where they're seeing their caregivers connect in all sorts of different ways. And I'm not saying sexually, because I don't think we should ever be connecting in front of our children sexually, but I'm talking about the cuddles and the little kisses and those compliments and those kinds of things. So
you're modeling for them. And to go back a little bit, you said one person was saying they feel nervous. They don't feel comfortable talking about sex, but they really want to explore new stuff. Like, even that would be a beautiful thing to share with a partner.
Yeah.
This is how I'm feeling. I feel anxious. I feel uncomfortable, but I really want to explore with you and see how that lands. And, hopefully that other partner would be like receiving and open to that. And if they had a hard time receiving that, there's no shame in getting some professional support to help you learn how to have conversations around sex and intimacy, because it is a skill that we often don't develop. But it is something that you can grow. You can get these skills as an adult if you feel willing.
Totally. A lot of what I'm hearing today again is like, in order for these skills to develop and what, it's again like looking within, what do I need? What do I want? And being vulnerable to be able to communicate that to the person before us that we want that with or want that from. And I think that those skills, you're right. Like, maybe when we first talk about it, we're not the greatest at it. But the more we model that, the more we practice that kind of a vulnerability, we get better. It's like anything that we do on a regular basis. And I think it's just like what you're saying is like, let's do it. Let's practice it. Let's have those, I don't even know. Like I think of a story when I first moved to Calgary and I'd go back to Surrey to visit my family. I'd go to this place to get my eyebrows threaded, and in Surrey, eyebrow boutiques are like Starbucks, or on every corner. It's you can get your eyebrows done for $2, and that's totally normal. And so I don't know where I was going at the time, but they were like two sisters that lived together with their spouses. And so their little boutique thing was in their basement. And so I'm there getting my eyebrows done and whatever else. And they're like, oh, so you're dating a white guy? And I was like, yes, I'm dating a white guy. And so they're like, oh, what's that like? And so I'm like, I don't know what that means, but so they asked me more specific questions, and really what they're getting at is they're very curious and very intrigued about what our sex life is like. So they're trying to get to this place to ask me this, and then finally one of them is a little more raw, I guess. And so she just comes out and says it, and she's like, well, I just want to know, like, what's your sex life like? And I'm like, okay, like, I don't even know you. You're doing my eyebrow. Yeah. I don't want to tell you. And my mother is sitting here too. So like, that's also really weird. And so she's like, well, and I'm like, why are you asking me this? And she's like, well, because I feel like my experience and like Indian men, they climb on you, they do their thing, and that's it. There's no, and that's literally what, and it sounded way worse in terms of more coarse in my language, and because she was talking to me in my language, and so I was like, okay. And why am I telling this story? Why am I saying this? I always think of her because she is one of so many people, I think women in particular in my culture, and this is what I grew up with, that want to explore, want to know, but just aren't allowed to because you're bad. Keep your legs closed. You're a woman. You just have babies. You don't get to enjoy it. And there's pleasure. Yeah. There is pleasure in there. So there's no build up. And so this emotional intimacy is a foreign thing. And some young couples out there watch that, growing up in their homes or with people around them. And so then they carry it out. And so even though we're so many years ahead on one hand with sexuality, but again, going back to those cultural norms and those religious norms, they pull us back quite a bit. And so now, I know we talked about religion and culture earlier, but I'm bringing it up now because I think of those women when you talk about how much of an impact it can be. It can make a relationship better in so many ways if we can just talk, just bring it up and see what happens if we were to ask our partner for something that we would normally not ask them for. Yeah.
To your example, in so many parts of the world, female pleasure in particular is really demonized and shamed. And it is really sad. But the thing that I've seen in a lot of my relationship work is that the penis owners in the relationship, they often really do desire their vulva owner counterpart to enjoy themselves.
Interesting.
They want their partner to show up and desire them. Yeah. And to really engage in the intimacy and the sex. And maybe they just don't know how, or maybe they don't know it's possible, or maybe, the vulva owner, they don't know how it's possible either because they've never been allowed to enjoy their bodies or find pleasure in their bodies and know that they don't need to be ashamed that their pleasure exists in the world.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. You don't know. You're right. Thank you for saying that because I don't ever think of it that way, and that's something for me to revisit too. Is that the other partner on the other side, usually it's the man, the penis owner, you're saying, would also may actually want to talk about it, or may actually, because you're right. Why wouldn't we want to be desired as individuals? That's a very uplifting, empowering feeling that can leave us buzzing, right? Those endorphins and that oxytocin you're talking about, that comes out because of that, because somebody desired me, and we have this connection, you know, somebody wants me in that way. We have that connection. And now I feel so great that I'm even more connected to you on this other level. And you're right, like the other partner may actually want to go there and talk about it. And so it takes one to just bring it up and see where it goes. And like you said, if we don't do it, nothing's going to change. So I guess you also have to ask yourself, okay, like, do I really want something to change or not? Because if I do, I can do something here. Going back to your question of like, what do I want here?
Yeah, things, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are, or how long you've been in a relationship. Things can change if you want them to. You can't make anyone else change in a relationship unless they want to, but you can. You can change. You can have a sexual relationship with yourself. Let's say hypothetically a partner is like, no way, I don't want to do therapy, I don't want to talk about this, no. Well, you still have the option of developing a sexuality and a sexual relationship with yourself if that's something that you want to do.
And still maintain in a monogamous relationship, you think? That's possible still?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
You can, this is probably a little more complicated, but,
fair.
You know.
Yeah, totally.
There's tons of self-pleasure to be had, both sexual and non-sexual. Back to that happiness piece.
Yeah.
What are you doing to make yourself live life, feel pleasure in life? Yeah. Do you want that to include a sexual relationship with yourself?
Right. I think what comes to mind is I don't know if you are a fan of Sex and the City. Are you? Yeah. What did you watch the last?
I've watched like lots of episodes, but I've never like followed the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and like most shows, if you know me well, you know that I watch them like 20 years after the fact. So like I watched Sex and the City 9 years ago when my son was born on mat leave. so I watched the Just Like That or whatever it is, the new one, and okay, so I should know their names, but it's Miranda, I believe, the lawyer. It's interesting in this last one, sex isn't important to the couple, but their rituals bring out that feeling that, like you're talking about, those endorphins, that excitement, that connection. So having certain desserts and watching a show, lounging, or, you know, doing an activity or something like that together is it's that we're coming together and doing this thing that we like. And so again, it doesn't have to be through sex or whatnot. However, the interesting thing in that is, because I've been thinking about her in this conversation, in there she sort of starts to find out that sexually it's not her husband that she's actually ever desired. She's just starts exploring her sexuality. And I think that's at the age too, because I think, you know, we haven't really tapped into hormones, and as we get older in life, I think sometimes some of us are a little more braver too, because we're like, well, you know, now's my time, or why I'm not doing myself any good by not finding out why I am attracted to this, or I see myself in a different sort of, as a different gender even. Like maybe I'm into women, I'm into men, and I wasn't, or maybe it's whatever. There's so much out there now. So I just think that's really neat that they put that out there, because I think for couples that are, I don't know if you see the right, that old, like a little bit older, and kids are all grown up, kids have left the house sort of thing, and you're back to the two of you, and you're like, hey, what do I want? I don't know, and figuring that stuff out. So I think, to be honest, there's a reason why I brought this up, but I've lost my train of thought, which happens sometimes. I'm trying to figure out why was I, oh yes, I know now. It's talking about hormones too as we age. So throughout the lifespan, our hormones change, which I think can, so it's not just like, like, what does that mean? Because I think hormones can change our outlooks, can change our experience, how we experience life, the people we choose to be around, that worldview that we are creating as a child, I think goes through like a changeover every time we're going through a major hormonal life, whether it's in adolescence, and as if people have children, and then there's also, as we get older, biologically we experience these things. So do you see people that are coming because of hormonal related issues? And if so, what are those kinds of issues?
Sometimes I do, yes. I have other colleagues who focus on like sex later in life or pre or post menopause. So yes, this is definitely a topic that affects sex life and bodies. Is that as we age, our bodies are constantly changing, and our hormones are changing. You know, as a penis owner ages, his testosterone is going to decrease.
Right.
That's just typical. It happens to everybody. And with that comes, you know, things like penises are not going to get as hard as they used to be.
Right.
Or maybe it's hard to get an erection when you want to or keep one. All of that's totally normal. Don't be afraid. This is just part of being human. And, you know, there's two things that you can do in that case, and I'll get to vulva owners as well. But in that case, like, you know, go see a medical doctor. They have like hormones that could help you, like topical hormones sometimes, or medications or shots that might help you in the hormone arena. And then in terms of like how do we explore sexuality changing as we age, there is so much pleasure and fun to be had, even if you don't have a hard-on. This is something a lot of people don't know. A penis owner can totally have an orgasm without a hard-on. That's possible. There's a lot of different
you're right.
types
I don't
of
think
sex.
many people know that. You're right. Like, how is that possible? Some people are probably like, what?
Yeah, just different kinds of stimulation.
Yeah.
So maybe penis and vagina penetration sex is not going to be on the table as much as it used to be. That's okay. There's lots of other types of sex and intimacy to be had. So it's no reason to stop having an intimate life with your partner. Okay, so that's the penis owners, the vulva owners. It's very common for women who are premenopausal, postmenopausal to experience maybe some vaginal pain due to the lining of the vagina becoming more dry. There might be less lubrication that your body is producing. That's typical. That's just part of the process, part of this beautiful aging process we go through. And so it can cause some pain. There's a lot of great different types of lubrication out there. You can also get hormonal treatments from your doctors, your gynecologists. For vulva owners, there's also a type of doctor called a urogynecologist who are very, very specialized in terms of women's health below the belly button. A urogynecologist. So if you ever want a specialist, I would recommend finding one in your area.
That's helpful to know, because I just, as a woman and being around some women that are a little, I always call them my future because they're a little ahead of me biologically, and they're going through major hormonal changes like menopause and those sorts of things. And it's just so hard sometimes to find the information out there. And I think it's good to know, like, do we have access to a urogyno? Because some of the things you're talking about, lubrication and all that, you even said a few minutes ago, like, don't worry about this. Don't be scared about that. You can actually, if you ask, like, you're going to find out that this isn't a you problem. Nothing's wrong with you. And a lot of what you're talking about, there seems to be a lot of fixes. So whether it's looking at your hormones and getting some kind of readjustment and doing some kind of whatever it is, I don't know, a doctor would recommend, or lubricants and creams and things like that. But we joked earlier about dial-up and all that, but we are in the era where we have multiple search engines that we can go on and type things in and kind of even start to help us think, okay, is this normal? Is to a point, because I know some people start to self-diagnose too. So let's be mindful of that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just to kind of get curious about and get that thought of our heads that, like, this is a me problem and I'm doing something wrong and something's wrong with me. Because I think there's never any good that comes out of that when we go down that path.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with you. Bodies change.
Yeah.
Ask questions, find professional help.
Yeah.
You know, there's people out there who are trained and willing and wanting to help you, support you
Right.
in whatever your journey is.
Yeah. And so you talked about penis owners and vulva owners, and then what about people that are experiencing some mental health struggles and maybe have low energy or like that low sex drive as well, and maybe they're on certain medications or they're having anxiety flare up, or their depression is at a really hard place. Like, have you had clients that come in and sort of link their mental health to some struggles with sex?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sexual desire is in every person completely different. And it's also, in my experience, it's kind of like a fragile thing. So many things can affect our sexual desire, make it go up or down, including medication, mental health, physical health, injuries, relationship status, food, you name it, hormones. If you are concerned that your mental health medication might be affecting your libido, go see your doctor. Talk about it. There are options out there. You can experiment with different medications, or maybe you need to adjust your dose.
Yeah.
But go talk about it. With a partner, I would say this is actually a really good question to ask yourself is like, what does sex even mean? What does it even look like? And this could apply to any time in your lives, but so a lot of people think sex is penis and vagina penetration.
Right. Yeah.
We focus on that. We also focus on orgasms.
Right.
And if you don't have orgasms, does that mean the sex was quote unquote bad or I failed?
That's right. Yes.
And I say absolutely not. That's not true. That is a myth. Sex can look any way you want it to look. It can mean anything you want it to mean. So let's say you're having a hard mental health day and you're like, I really can't, or I don't want to have penis and vagina penetrative sex. I don't feel up for that. But I would really like to make out and like take a bubble bath. That sounds so yummy and that would be so pleasurable. That could be sex for you.
Right. So defining
I really
what it
want
means.
to, asking yourself, what do I want? And sex can look like anything you want it to look like. You know, massages, kisses, playing with toys, using your hands, using our mouths, using other objects. We can get so creative with what sex looks like. So if you're having a hard time, like you were describing, just ask yourself, like, what do I feel up for right now? Because, you know, even when we don't feel well, we still want to connect. So focus on that. What would feel connecting and what would feel pleasurable? And that can look like anything you want it to, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, I like that you said that, and I think if I can just go back to when you were just saying, what am I like kind of feeling right now, or what am I wanting right now?
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because it also goes in some ways, like the first thing that comes to mind is also consent. Like when you're in a relationship, sometimes a long-term relationship, consent can kind of get forgotten in a way too. It's like, well, you kind of belong to me. I kind of belong to you now. So if I want it, I should get it anytime. Like I have a built-in sex partner now. So if I want to have it once, twice, three, whatever times a day, whenever, you know, in the middle of the night, I can wake you up and you should. And if you say no, then you don't want me and you want someone, you know, like I just think there's so many scenarios I can come out of that. So can we talk about that for a second? Because I don't know if that is something that comes up or not, or maybe it's like a one-off thought, but I wonder sometimes about that too in relationships, where it's not just something at the beginning, but it's through the lifespan of that relationship. And you're saying sometimes people's sexual drive changes, we talked about all sorts of reasons right now why it may not be, I may not be in a place where I would want to, but now I feel the pressure because I have to, let's say, because if I don't, my partner's gonna go get it from someone else or something like that. What do you have to say about that? Yeah.
Ooh, there's a lot to say about this. It's a big topic. And I see it all of the time with individuals and in relationships. This consent is a pillar to healthy sexual relationships and expression, and it is widely missed in our sex education at home and in schools. And it's a crime that we miss it because it is so important. The idea that we're obligated to provide a partner with sex and sexual gratification causes so much anxiety. I see this mostly from the vulva owner's perspective, but it can be the other way around. A lot of penis owners, they feel sexual anxiety and performance anxiety too. I see that often. So the idea that I have this partner at home and we're married and so I can just fuck anytime I want.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be like really cringy actually because it's very objectifying.
Yes.
To your partner, right? You're reducing them to a sex toy basically. And some people, most people, I would say, are probably not doing that on purpose. That is just what they've learned, that's what they know, and that's how they show up. So if that's something that you want to change and challenge within yourself, you totally can. And so I do this with relationships all the time. Is I do this exercise with them where they do these, it's like a touch exercise, and I ask them to express by using yes, no, maybe later. Like, I get them to ask, like, hey, I want to touch your ear. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. And the person receiving that can say, no, maybe later. And it's like a practice.
Yeah. That sounds good with kids, too. Yeah.
Oh, super good with kids. Use this with your kids. Ask them, hey, can I have a hug? Hey, can I help you take off your coat? Practice using this language with your kids is going to set them up for huge success in their relationships, I think.
Yeah, but I can't ask my kids because if I ask them, can I have a hug, their answer is no. So that rule doesn't apply to me. I have to get my hugs from them, and no, I'm kidding. No, but yeah, my older one, I have to, if I don't ask, then it's like I get in trouble. So I do have to ask that. And I do agree with you too. Like we should be. And I think it's like a good way to role model to them too, to be asking that, because I also learned in the last recording with Angie, who was here, the therapist, as I was saying, we were talking about how to teach our kids boundaries at a young age. Like sometimes kids developmentally are in that phase where they keep repeatedly asking the same thing because they want you to change your answer from no to yes. So please, can I have this? Can I have this? And I was like, oh, I love that, because I see that all the time with my kids, and we have conversations all the time about that too. But it's such a good reminder, because I didn't even realize what I was doing, like how I was responding, by saying, Kate, I was responding in the correct way, in a good way, but I didn't realize what Angie had brought up. I'm like, oh, I didn't connect the two. That goes with consent. And like this exercise is just like that, in the same way of, asking. Especially siblings can practice that really well, because they're always all up in each other's business, right? It's don't touch me, get off me, get away, get off the other couch, or whatever. And so practicing that, I think, is a really good example. And even for us, as like you said, as adults, absolutely. And can I have this, or can I come in for this hug or whatnot?
Right. Practicing consent is about creating respect, mutual respect between partners. It's about creating trust. When I say no, you're going to respect that, and I feel safe in that. Mm-hmm. That's so important. And it's not just about sex. It's applicable to anything we do. Even asking, hey, I want to talk about this hard topic. Is this a good time for you? You're asking for consent.
Yes. Yeah.
You're asking for permission. And I think people feel very scared to talk about consent explicitly because there's so much negative connotation around it having to do with sexual assault.
Yes. Good point.
Right. So that's okay. It's okay that we feel nervous about it or it might be scary, but just know that if we can get on the same page and practice using explicit consent in our relationships, you're going to create trust and safety and respect, and that's only going to help.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And help us get to maybe that one day when we may want to explore other alternatives or whatnot, or help us make other decisions. And I think these kinds of practicing methods can help us prepare us in all sorts of, you said it's not just about the bedroom and having sex. And I think that's a really good point. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, is there anything at this point that, kind of like a little check-in with you, anything that you were hoping to bring up or were hoping to be asked today that maybe we haven't brought up or I haven't asked?
I don't know. We covered so much.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
That felt very thorough, good surface to a lot of things that I do in my work. Yeah, maybe just a sentiment. I guess back to the societal message that sex is taboo and we don't talk about it. I would really encourage people to get brave and find support if they want it. Talk to your friends. Or if that's not safe, talk to a doctor. Go to a therapist. Read books. Find some great books. Oh, and I have a book recommendation.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If you'd like it.
Yes,
so
please.
There's this great book. It does focus on female sexuality, but I think everybody should read this book, any gender, because it's based in science, and that's why I love this book. It's called Come As You Are, C-O-M-E, Come As You Are, by Emily Nagoski, Nagoski. And this book is just this really interesting scientific overview of sexuality. From everything to like bodies, arousal, to like what's going on in your brain in terms of arousal.
Yeah.
And she answers some really interesting questions in there. So that's a book I'd recommend. Yeah, and then for penis owners, there's a book called The Penis Book.
I love it. Just like right to the point.
Yeah, even has a little eggplant on the cover. Yeah, and it's by Aaron, Aaron Spitz, Spitz. And he is a medical doctor, the author, and he talks about, everything to do with your penis. Penis health, penis problems, penis medications, food. He has a chapter on how what we eat affects our penis health.
Right.
So it's just a really interesting book.
Yeah. I think that it's nice to be reminded that while this is a taboo, there are people out there, there's science behind some of the things we're wondering. There's a lot out there that is pushing towards building a culture where we have healthy conversations. And I love when, like, I keep going back to what you said, right? Like talking about food in some ways of, okay, let's bring this up. And always, always, if we have children involved in this, looking at where is our brain at in development and where is the, just so to help guide us, so we're not sharing too much information too soon, or we're not so far behind because we think our 11 or 9-year-old don't know enough when really they're at quite further ahead. So I think that's helpful. What about one takeaway? If there was one thing that you would suggest or a question you'd want to leave with listeners today about sex, what would it be?
Oh,
and maybe it's not about sex. Maybe it's just in general.
Like a question I would want people to reflect on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or some homework, something you want us to go do or ask or say.
I would just ask yourself, what is it that I want for my sexual self? What do I want for my sexual self? And just be really curious about what the answers might be. You might not know right away, and that's okay. Just be curious about it. Try not to judge whatever comes up. Like, just just sit with it and be curious about it.
Right.
And that might open up some really interesting discovery and exploration.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm answering in my head. That's why I'm so quiet right now. Like what? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, all the questions that you posed today are so good because I think that they're just overlooked. They're questions that we overlook because we don't want to go there. But they're so important. Like, what do I want from this? What does this mean to me? And I think that's a good reminder and a reframe about if I want to improve something, let's say my sex life or my sex education, I got to start again with what do I want to know? What does that mean to me? And so I think that's great. I'm going to also ask you, because I didn't at the beginning, this, an opportunity to drop your plug. So is there, where people want to get in touch with you, or I don't know if you do like Zoom or therapy? Because I know you're in the States. And so if people are interested or if they have questions, maybe on if you have a website as well as like an Instagram page, like what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is SkyeBluTherapy.com. And you got to spell my first name correctly. It's SkyeBlu. So SkyeBluTherapy.com, that's my official website. I can only do therapy with folks who live in the state of Washington because that's where I'm licensed.
Okay. Good to know.
Yep. I have an Instagram, SkyeBlu Therapy.
Perfect.
And I also have a Facebook page as well, SkyeBlu Therapy. So you can follow me on social media. I am going to, within the next year, I'm going to create an online course for folks who want to build or rebuild intimacy and sex in their relationships.
Oh, that's so cool. Why didn't we talk about that more? maybe we're not ready to close yet. Maybe you can come back once you get. Yeah, I think this is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. So you can follow me on social media. Those things are gonna be a little bit more active because I want to build like an audience for my course that's coming out. Let's see. Oh, so for folks, if you want to find a sex therapist where you live.
Yes. Okay.
You can go to, it's ASECT. ASECT. I think it's asect.com.
Okay.
That's the American Association Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
Perfect. And
it's just an organization. It spans into Canada too. It has a search. You can search for professionals, and you can search for like your province or your state.
Right.
So you can find someone licensed where you live.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Where's
I think before we call it, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed my time. I loved your questions. Thanks for being so engaged and curious about all of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, like you said, it was a good door opener. It's a good start. And that's what most of these conversations on these episodes are, all door openers. So if anyone out there has any more feedback for us or any questions, again, we really appreciate all the feedback we've been getting post every episode. So I know some folks are like, I'm sorry if I'm annoying for sending you feedback. I'm like, no, please send it to us because it helps us gauge if what we're putting out there is what you guys out there want to listen to or hoping to learn from. So just give us the info of what you want and we'll get it out there. And if anyone wants to get in touch and provide that feedback, I can be reached at MFU Podcast as well as info@mfupodcast.com. Otherwise, Blue, it was just as exciting for me being here with you. So thank you for letting me ask all the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It was such a pleasure.
Perfect. For everyone else, thank you for listening, and we will talk soon.
Bye.